Okay, it is 1:01, so we are going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to our first speaker, Val Meyerson, who is the director of the Petoskey Library. I'm going to go ahead and turn the reins over to her so she can introduce and she can share her slides. Hi, Val.
Thanks, Claire. It's nice to be here, and I'm looking forward to hearing Shirley and her talks. I always learn something new whenever Shirley's speaking, so it'll be nice to hear that. Again, I'm Val Meyerson. I'm the director here at the Petoskey District Library, and I've been a public library director for over 30 years, beginning with the Wixom Public Library in 1992. And while I feel like I provide the same service now as I did 30 years ago, the questions of how we provide service is changing. I used to be quietly comfortable in my role as First Amendment supporter, but these days it's not so easy and definitely not so quiet. Our role is moving to a place where we need to be clarifying our philosophy on a regular basis. And Claire asked me to speak with you today due to the experiences I have had in my community with questions about our collections, displays, and events. Feel free, if you have a question for me, you can put it in the chat. I'll try and monitor that while I'm doing the presentation. That's not a problem. So anyway, back to what I was saying, and I've never had really a formal challenge here in Petoskey, but I have had a lot of complaints at township meetings and at library board meetings about specific books, displays, and organizations we have partnered with. We've been threatened with being defunded. People have tried to intimidate us by stating that hordes of people were going to leave the library if we didn't comply with their wishes. And the worst is actually people are stealing our materials. And so here the big question really becomes, when we have a ballot initiative, which we do next year, how do we run our campaign in this climate? And so historically, libraries typically ran quiet campaigns because everybody loves the library, right? There's no need for aggressive campaigning. And in the current climate, though, it doesn't really ring true. And I believe that we need to be ready for naysayers to come out and run a loud and obnoxious anti-library campaign. We need to be prepared for the worst and not just quietly hope for the best. There's a few different ways that you can plan your campaign, and you'll be learning quite a bit more about this with Shirley's talk. But I kind of see two different avenues. An education campaign adds more time and effort, and what it does is provides transparency and forums for people to learn about what really happens at the library. Whereas a Get Out the Vote campaign is really about targeting your known supporters and getting them to a ballot. And that's, of course, much less time consuming and certainly could be less contentious. So you would really need to think about what works in your community and weigh the pros and cons of how you want to run the campaign. I would decide this with lots of conversations with your stakeholders. And some things I would be thinking about include time and effort of the different types of campaigns, the cost. How are you going to feel if you don't have a planned response to a negative campaign? And how will you respond if when your supporters want to help you? How many actual no voters do you think there are? Sometimes they're really loud and it seems like a lot of people, but is it really? Those are all good things to contemplate while you're deciding what type of campaign to run. Really, there's pros and cons of both. If you decide to run a more aggressive education campaign, you'll have the benefit of clarifying your message. It's a good way to get your supporters energized. It feels really good to stand up for the mission of the library. And it's nice to have a planned avenue for any sort of counter-offensive that might be coming your way. Some negative things, though, about doing a more in-depth campaign is that, of course, it takes more time, more effort, costs more. again, you could rile up people, but you could rile up your naysayers too and really motivate them to come out. And you could be bringing out no voters that may not have been even interested in going to the polls. And it's also when you have a lot of information that you're trying to share, sometimes it's difficult to keep all your stakeholders on task. Now, if you do decide to proceed with having a more vocal public campaign, planning is really key. And the first step is to recruit your team for your PAC or your political action committee. Remember, this can't be your board, and you can't be paid by the library to participate on the PAC. So recruiting your team, you want to look to lots of different types of people. Staff members can participate, so you can be on the Public Action Committee or PAC, but you can't do that on library time. You can use paid leave time for that, but it can't be on your regular library hours. You definitely want to look for people with experience in running a campaign or being on a PAC. It's really helpful to have a team leader that has experience with the filings and all the, checking off your list of things that you have to do for a PAC. It's not difficult, but you want to make sure you do it properly and you get all your filings done correctly. You also, of course, you want to look for people that understand the library and the library's mission. Those are your users, you know them, those folks that you might even have an advocacy list already started, contact them to help you out. Another thing you're going to want to look towards, of course, is the diversity of this committee. It's key. You want to have people from lots of different places within your community. So when you get ready to get your message out, you're going to have a pathway to find everyone, all of your residents. So once you have your team assembled, that's really when the work begins. And to me, a millage campaign is really kind of just a communication plan. How are you going to communicate your message? So that's what I do, is I look at this whole process as a communication plan. So for a communication plan, there's 5 different steps. Your goals, define your audience, create your outreach plan, and that identify your message and create a timeline. The first few meetings that you have with your team are going to be all about setting up this plan and setting the process and putting those pieces of the puzzle together. So that first step, of course, is what goals do you have for your plan? And of course, this one's pretty easy because you want to pass your millage. That'll be your number one goal. But how you get that done and what action items are included in that to be successful is all in your planning. Many libraries traditionally, like I said earlier, work on a smaller get out the vote campaign to get their supporters to the ballot. But in this current climate, like I said, plan for the worst. I would consider going more in depth with this education campaign instead, because that avenue gives your residents a lot of opportunities to hear your message and for you to share your message and to give people a good opportunity to ask questions. And then naysayers won't be able to truthfully say that you shut the door on them and that you didn't give them an opportunity to speak. There'll be plenty of opportunities if you plan for it. So when you're looking at this, this kind of an education campaign, I think it's important to add a goal about where you're going to get your message across, about how you're going to provide those opportunities for disseminating the correct information, how you're going to offer a safe space for conversation. And what I'm really finding with some of these naysayers is that they really do appreciate it when I take time for them, when I give them an opportunity to express their concerns, and I actually listen to what they're saying. And providing a lot of opportunity for that, I think, is really helpful. The other nice thing about this education campaign is you've given yourself a way to hear from the residents and gather feedback that you can then use to tweak your campaign down the road. So the goals that you create at this front part are going to be your guidance and pathway to a successful millage campaign. And once you finish this whole 5-point part of creating your communication plan. Come back to your goals. Make sure that everything all aligns properly, that the goals align with your outreach and that your goals, your message aligns with your goals. And of course, any plan like this is super fluid. It can be changed whenever. So don't forget that as well. The next part of your communication plan is really looking at your audience. And this is the part where I think it's important to know who your audience is, who's going to be listening, and who's going to be interested to hear your message. And this is all going to drive how you craft your message and your outreach efforts. Of course, there's a few different supporter groups that you'll be marketing to. First, of course, is your cheerleader supporters that are always out to support you, and they definitely go and vote every single time. The second type of supporter would be those that love you and appreciate what you're doing, but they're not voters and they just have a hard time getting to the polls. Another group would be people that may be hearing some things that they don't like and that they're confused about, and maybe they need more information. And these folks are key because they can go either way at the ballot box. They can be swayed to help support you. Another group of people that I think it's important to know who they are the people that are telling and sharing the negative stories about your library. Most likely those folks are going to vote no. Most likely you're not going to convince them otherwise. But I think you do want to get to know them and know who they are and know what their story is, because you can craft your message based on those stories. And the folks that might be having questions about what we're doing, you can include answers to some of those questions in the messages that you're putting out. So do some research, get on the sites where they're sharing information. I think it's important to know who these folks are and where are they talking. For example, here in Emmett County, there's a site, the ERG site, it's Emmett Responsible Government. And this is where a group of people share information about what they claim is misuse of taxpayer dollars. I found a lot of posts there about the library, and it really helps me understand a little bit about where they're coming from and what their issues are with the library. Another place, do you have people that are negatively commenting on your social media? This is another place to approach somebody maybe for a conversation. If you don't really understand what's going on, these folks may be willing to talk to you. We had one gentleman here in Petoskey who would negatively comment on our posts pretty regularly. And to be honest, it was very annoying. Sometimes he would post something or comment about something that had nothing to do with the post that we had put out there. So it was just frustrating. But I actually contacted him to see if he wanted to sit down to have a conversation, in which we did. And while it was a slightly frustrating conversation, I think he gained some information and insight from me, as well as me having a little bit of a better understanding of his issues. I think he gained a newfound respect for what my job entails, hearing some of the struggles that we have in providing service for everyone. Now, I don't necessarily think I've changed his mind, but I think he may think twice before commenting on something. And I think he gained a little bit of insight and respect maybe for me and what we're doing here. So, but for all the groups, really your message is going to be the same. You might tweak it a little bit depending on who you're talking to. Your outreach efforts on where you're going and where you're posting are going to be different for all these different types of people, looking at who they are, especially age ranges. You know, people are on different places and get their information from different places. So you're going to want to know all those different people. When you are speaking with people that you know are taking issue with what you're doing in your library, the naysayers, I keep saying, not quite sure how else to talk associate with them, but that's kind of the word that I've come up with is the naysayers. But when you're talking with them, try to remember to be empathetic. I have found that most of these folks are following their personal morals and principles. They truly believe that what they're doing is right and best for the community. And really, most people want to love the library, and they really do appreciate time given to hear their concerns. So one thing that I've done is I try and find common ground, because that at least will give you something to agree on. There was one conversation I had with a woman that was literally going in circles, and we were getting nowhere. It was a lot of time spent on this. And finally, we were able to kind of stop the conversation. And I just asked, hey, can we at least agree on one thing, that the public library is here to serve the needs of everyone in our community? She agreed, and we were able to end our conversation on a positive note. So that was, again, not someone that I think I've changed their vote, the way they're going to vote, but I think people will gain a little bit of respect and understanding for us and what we're trying to do here in the public library realm. So I'm not saying that you have to talk with these folks, especially if you think you already have a good handle on their issues. But if you want more information to help craft your message, give it a try. Having a better understanding will just help clarify everything. And I'll be honest with you, here in Petoskey, I think the underlying issue and what really started the microscope on the, opening that microscope up to people looking at the library, the underlying issues with the naysayers really is based around LGBTQ issues. And, it's sad and it breaks my heart, but that's what it is. And it's good for me to know that up front, because I can do different things and be in different places to help counter some of that if need be. So the next part of our communication plan is your outreach. Outreach is the map that you're going to use to get your message across and to provide opportunities to disseminate the information that that's part of your message. So you have to figure out what avenues you're going to use. This is really a good time to look at your audience and where and how is the best place to reach them. And maybe now's a good time. I've been talking at you for almost 20 minutes now. And how about everybody think about how you get your message across in your community? Type in chat. Where do you try and reach your community when you're trying to share information? What places do you use? Let's see how many we can come up with. So hopefully people are still there. I'll start. For example, Facebook. Perfect. Thank you. Everybody, I think, uses Facebook. It's a great way to get information out. The newspaper, definitely. People still look at the newspaper, especially folks, older generations, they would probably use the newspaper. Instagram, of course. Flyers, yes, putting in your community centers, high schools, that kind of thing. Radio, wonderful. Emails, word of mouth, definitely very popular and holds a lot of authority. So that's really great. What about organizations and groups in your communities? Do you ever present to your service clubs or other groups? What about TikTok? Is anybody on TikTok? And I don't know, TikTok seems like a great way to reach a lot of people. Hopefully it'll be around for a while. We don't know. Definitely Rotary clubs, all your service clubs, other clubs within your community. Those are all great places to reach people. Definitely your governing entities. Those are, presenting at your township board meetings and city council meetings and county commission meetings, all a great way to get your message across. A couple other things, endorsements. That's a wonderful way to help strengthen your message. this is it's nice to get a few quotes from people in the community that are respected, that people listen to, and use those quotes in your messaging. And especially if you have people that you think like the naysayers may listen to, that's a great way to help get your message out, is with endorsements. Another couple things that somebody had mentioned, their friends. Don't forget your friends, your board, and especially your staff. Include all of these in your outreach efforts. Your board, friends, and staff, of course, are your biggest advocates, and they're really going to help clarify your message and get that message home. So don't forget to do your outreach efforts to include those important groups. The goal really is to provide for this education campaign is to provide a lot of different opportunities for people to hear the truth and give them time to ask questions and clarify anything that they may be confused about. For example, in my previous position, we had a millage campaign that was a new millage and a new bond millage at the same time that would more than triple the amount of the current costs that people were paying for library service. So we planned a pretty aggressive education campaign, and this outreach calendar was very busy. It included all those regular avenues, but we uniquely offered something different. We did a weekly coffee hour at the library that was presented by our friends. So, and it targeted the movers and shakers of the community. Initially, we sat down together and made a list of all the movers and shakers in our community. And we worked together with the friends to create a presentation that they could use, that they had a great understanding of. And they individually invited 15 people at a time from this list to come to a weekly presentation to hear about the library and to give them kind of this small group time frame to answer questions or to hear answers to their questions that they might have. And it was a pretty safe environment. And that was, I think, a huge help to us passing our millage. You know, and it didn't hurt that the friends baked muffins each week as well. So really, you want to talk to people in a lot of different places, a lot of different avenues to get that message across. Nowadays, with so many different places to be posting and talking and sharing, you definitely are going to need some sort of color-coded shared calendar that includes, you're going to have your whole campaign on there, includes your posts, press releases, meetings, articles that you might be publishing. It's really the when, where, and backbone of your campaign to help keep you organized and keep you on task so that you can be successful. So just looking at chat for a minute. Oh, I love that Robert said yes, that a lot of times it's after the meetings that a lot of things will be clarified for people. And that can be that one-on-one conversation, and it really does strengthen your message. So those live in-person meetings can be crucial. Now, of course, the central part of your campaign is the message. So that's the next thing that we're going to be working on. And now that you know where you're going to put your message out, you have an idea of how to format each type of message that you're going to have. And before crafting a message, I always like to review your mission, review all your services. How are you affecting your community? Also take a look at some of the complaints from the naysayers, and see how you can weave in different counters to those naysayers into your messaging. For example, here in Petoskey, some people complain about us having displays during Pride Month. And in my message to for my campaign next year, I'm certainly going to talk about this, is that how the library creates displays throughout the year on many different topics. And I would include examples that I know, or I would be confident that my detractors would probably appreciate or approve of. And that would be, like, for example, that we create displays throughout the year on many topics like first responders or religion or civics, something that I would think folks would appreciate that we would be doing displays on. So when creating the message, I always, again, I start with not only looking back at who we are, looking at our mission, vision, values, all of that. I'll also brainstorm with my group bullet points of library services and different items that we think would be important to highlight in these messages. And again, include things that you think might interest your naysayers. And these bullet points, and you can, you're going to have this big, huge list, and then you can pull apart this list and create themes that you can then use in, you could do a weekly theme and do all your posts and press releases and talks based around that theme. And that'll give you a great way of targeting your message and having being able to get a lot of information out there throughout your campaign. Also, don't forget about the millage information itself. You want to be able to explain the costs to the public. That's always important. So you want to have that available all the time as well. Remember, when you're crafting this, use the language from your mission statement. Stay on point with all your information. And speaking of language, make sure if your community might have trigger words that you should stay away from. I've learned that here in Petoskey, there's certain words that I just like to not use in my language. For example, one person told me that hearing that I provide a safe space for all was a trigger word, thinking that we were following some sort of doctrine and that other places in town were not safe. So for general posts, I make sure to scrub my language of words like safe, equity, diversity, inclusiveness, anti-racism. And instead, I talk about being comfortable here, being comfortable in the library, and providing space and materials for all people in the community. In live sessions, make sure you're prepared. That is key. Again, know your audience, because you can tweak your message knowing who will be there. I would have a very different speech prepared speaking to the gun club versus speaking to a retired teacher's sorority. Of course, have your talk written out and practice it. And again, plan for the worst. You've done your homework, you know what the complaints will be. So practice in front of a mirror or a friend on how you'll respond to any questions or attacks that you might get. And remember, always stay on message. Don't let yourself be coaxed into an argument with anyone. A couple tricks: if you're uncomfortable answering a question directly, pick a generic related talking point. And just answer it with that and move on. That's like, you see politicians all the time that somebody will ask them this pointed question and they say something that's not even really related, and then they move on. And that's just the way it is. And I think that's a great tactic because it gives you another opportunity to get your message across. And you're not going to start any sort of argument in a public forum. In difficult moments, you want to stop, take a breath, and acknowledge in your mind that, yes, this is hard. This is some of the hardest stuff we've ever had to do as public librarians. And then get back to point. Acknowledging the fact that it's hard to me, helps me. It gives me that assurance that it's okay, that I'm feeling anxious, because yes, it's a hard thing to do. Don't try and argue the merits of specific titles either. You do not, in a public forum or live forum, you don't want to get in an argument with people. If specific titles are challenged in a public forum, Just explain that there's a process in place for that and for challenging items, but the public forum is not that place. Provide the information on how to find your reconsideration form and collection development policy and give them that. Remember, again, don't take any attacks personally. You got to put your armor on so you can protect yourself and move forward. Another couple tricks that I like to have in my back pocket is to have a story that would be appropriate to respond with an attack. Instead of having a bullet point, you can have a personal story. So when somebody comes out that's attacking something, you'll have a story to tell in response. So if somebody comes out questioning why you have LGBTQ items in the library, you can just come out and tell the story of someone that used the library to help them grow and learn about themselves and become a productive citizen of our community because of something they were able to find in our collection. Data is also good to have. One statistic I like to keep in my pocket is the percent of items in the collection that have an LGBTQ theme. Mine is a little less than 4% of our 65,000 items, which leaves a lot of items that are not LGBTQ themed for them to select from. Another tactic for dealing with tough situations in a live forum is to answer a question with a question. Again, we've all heard these tactics before, and it just makes it so people can think about things and it stops them a little short. So, if somebody yells at you about how can you have these items available for a child to see, you could come back and just say, well, I would ask you, how would you like me to respond if your neighbor asks me to remove the Bible from the collection for being violent? Because that's all a part of the First Amendment. So in the First Amendment that we're standing up for. And again, you can use those tactics, have a couple things in your back pocket, but then move on and stay on point. Also, all your messages, you want to make sure you include the crucial information of your campaign. You want to remind people to vote yes, and when the date of the election is, and even things now with absentee balloting, deadlines for when to get your ballot or pick up your ballot or where to put your, submit your ballot. Those are all good things to include for your voters. Another thing that we do here is have a one-page information sheet at the library that as a handout. It can be a flyer, it can be a brochure, a bookmark, whatever you want to do. And it explains the costs of the millage and informs the patron of the services they get for those costs. It's always good to include the ballot language as well, so that way people can actually see and read and ask questions about the ballot language before they actually get the ballot. Remember though, if it's at the library and you're handing it out, it can't have your vote yes message. It can only have the information about the ballot, when, where, and the information about your library. You can't ever include that vote yes on information or flyers at the library. So the last part of your communication plan would be your timeline. Of course, you work on your timeline backwards from election day. I think for me this year, I'm going to do a 9-month campaign. Typically, we've done 6 months in the past, but I think this is going to be a little bit more difficult for us this year. So I'm going to give us a little bit more time. But again, you can create your own timeline based on what your comfort level is. You may think 6 months is fine to do your campaign, and that's great to get stuff started. It's really your comfort level and where you want to go with that. So a couple things the first things, of course, you do is you're going to be building your team. You're going to be looking at your budget. How much do you think you're going to be needing initially? You're going to be pulling your pack together, and you're going to start fundraising. And then the next piece that you're going to be doing is you're going to be working on your messaging. You're going to be working on gathering voter lists, and you're still fundraising. This is a really good time to tweak your budget. You have a better idea of how much money you might have. You also have an idea of what your outreach strategy is going to be. So how much money are you going to need? So you're going to want to tweak your budget a little bit at that point. The next part, you want to make sure you get your outreach calendar all solidified. And this is making contacts with any groups you're going and get them on your calendar, that kind of thing. And then you can start your education campaign. And this, you can really start that anytime. It doesn't have to be 3 months out. It could be 6 months out. But you're going to start visiting your places and start talking about the library and answering questions and providing that information that people are going to need to vote yes for your campaign. A couple weeks out from election day, you're going to want to start your Get Out the Vote campaign, where you're really targeting at this point your yes group, where you want to make sure these folks get to the polls, get to the ballot, and vote yes for your millage. This is a good time if you're using yard signs, you can put those out. I don't know the pros and cons of that. You could go on for a while on those. And then, of course, the day before, again, you're still working on your Get Out the Vote campaign. I think this is good to make phone calls. If you want to do that and get your voters and supporters to make sure they voted or are going to the poll. And then, of course, election day, you can continue phone calling that day as well if you want. And then it's a super long day waiting for the polls to close and getting your information on which way it goes. So that's your timeline. So just to wrap it up a little bit with some tips. Again, be mindful of your language. Ask lots of questions of your stakeholders. Make sure you listen. Plan ahead. Know what buttons of yours might get pushed. You know what really bothers you and hits deep inside of you that you're going to be hurt or aggravated or made angry over. Know what those are beforehand and have responses to all of them. Jennifer Sierra has 3 C's for these kinds of campaigns: be clear, be curious, and be calm. KISS is always a good system. You always want to use good language or easy language, make it so everybody can understand that. Another thing that's nice is in your public forums, bring someone with you that can take notes. So you have the feedback from those public forums written down from someone else other than you if you're delivering the message, because you can use that information to tweak messages going forward. And so that's always really helpful. Also remember smiling. This is a great way to not only make you feel better, because we all feel better when we smile, but it throws your opponents off because they don't want you to be that comfortable. They're trying to get under your skin. So smile, smile, smile. And the last few more tips, again, be mindful of your language, plan ahead, and let's see here. I think that was it. And use your feedback from your public forums, like I said. And with that, does anybody have any questions? I'm going to stop sharing.
Val, I have a question, Val.
Okay.
What do you do to prepare your staff to be good ambassadors for a library also with some of these people?
That's a great question. And this is all part of the training. I think it's really important to train your staff on how to respond to people that are negative about the library, because it's really hard to not get defensive. And it's really hard to understand where some folks are coming from. And I think if you prepare them and go through training, do lots of role playing, scenarios listed, hearing language, giving them good responses in writing that they can use and have. When we had, about over a year ago, actually, we gave staff the option of putting pronouns on their name badges. And this took we talked about it a lot in staff meetings. And some staff were nervous because the frontline staff, they knew they would be getting the questions and they really didn't understand it that well. And they weren't sure they'd be able to respond properly. So we made little cards, little sheets that had really basic information and some links for people to go to get more information that then they could hand to the patrons to let the staff, they were able to feel more comfortable that way with this whole new change and dealing with the staff. But I really think training and role playing is imperative for your staff and having the information available for them to share.
Thank you. That was awesome. Does anybody else have any questions that they'd like to ask Val? You will most likely get another chance at the very end. Okay.
Yeah, I'll be on and available after Shirley's talk.
Thank you, Val.
You are welcome.
Really appreciate it. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Shirley Bruursema. For most of you, Shirley probably does not need an introduction. I am going to let her introduce herself. She is a she's a longtime trustee for Kent District Library. She's also a consultant that works with a lot of libraries on millages. She also works with many boards across the state on board issues. She has been very helpful to me since I came into this position. So I would like to introduce Shirley Bruursema. Shirley, are you out there?
Thank you, Claire. I am out here.
Okay.
Thank you for the introduction. I will introduce the millage queen for a minute. That was a name given to me quite a few years ago by another library director. So I've been doing these millage campaigns for 23 years. I've completed 145 of them to date for both small and large libraries. I won 137 on the first ballot and 7 on the second ballot. Unfortunately, I lost my first one last year, which we all know, the Patmos Library. And otherwise, in 2014, I coached and consulted in one time 22 libraries, and I won all 22. So that's my claim to fame. I've always had the full support of the library, and that is really key when you're doing a millage campaign. 13 library campaigns I've done a second time, which I'm honored to help again. 6 of them were for new library buildings, and that gives me warm and fuzzies when people call and say, we want to build a new building, because I feel that is a dedication of the community second to none to want to build a new building or do a huge remodel job. That's just all a dedication to the whole community. So I have had, a lot of experience as a trustee. I've been on KDL now going on 20 years. Before that, I was on the county library trustee board prior to becoming a district board. I've been on the cooperative board, Lakeland Cooperative, for 32 years. I'm the only trustee on there. So proud to be co-founder of the Alliance of Trustees from 2011 to 2021. I've done a lot of speakers experience, presented multiple times at ALA, PLA, MLA, given over 200 workshops for library trustees, and I've received many library awards. A few that I'm noteworthy. Boardroom here at KDL was named the Bruursema Boardroom in January 2020. And the picture you see of me was done by an artist here at KDL in dedication of that room. I've got the MLA Lifetime Achievement Award winner in 2016. I'm listed in the Library of Congress for all the awards that I've received. And in 2009, I was named ALA Trustee of the Year. One last thing, and probably the most important that I will tell you about myself. I'm a mother of 6 children, all college educated, grandma of 10, great grandma of 12, and was a proud bride for 66 plus years. So now enough about me. I'm honored and humbled to share coaching and advice on running a successful millage campaign in contentious times. Obviously, we know we're in them now. So thank you for joining today. Great to see a nice turnout. I know we all wish it was in person, but I'm thankful you and I are able to be here in the post-pandemic and conserve travel time, plus of course saving on gas. And this week it's at a premium because it's spring break where I live. I want to get started now with what I came here to talk about, and that was winning a millage in a contentious time, and that we were able to do. Post any questions you may have along the way in the meeting chat. Before I begin, I know many of you will have questions, and if you want them answered ASAP, just raise your hand or let me know and we can address that. It is a big honor to be asked to share this experience with you. When I started this particular millage campaign, we were at it 2 years working at it. We didn't know it was going to be so contentious, but it was quite a challenge. And so here's an outline of what I'm going to cover on the tips to how to win the millage campaign. Understand the realities of your current situation, and then all the bullets that I will cover individually. Some of the examples: we need to look closely at our collection, facilities, leadership, staff, community needs, and wages. We need to understand our mix of board members, including establishing a new board for a district library, which adds another level of complexity. We need to know how community leaders are feeling. Maybe there's 1 or 2 council members who don't want a library, and creates another level of contentiousness as we go forward. And of course that happened here, and that's why we wanted to continue being, even though that was not possible. Don't overlook the school district. Our children are our future, and we all agree we need to ensure their future by having books for research, enjoyment, stretching their minds, etc. School district and parents within are very important voters, and that is where we are working with this particular library. The library is the school district is the border for the library millage area. The library we are discussing shares a building in the village, along with village offices and of course village council. The Historical Society also has space in the library. The library director worked for extremely low minimum wage to establish the library, and up until now never had a millage. The director, myself, community members started 2 years prior to a millage vote to put together all the necessary issues to accomplish such a project. We spent many hours with legal counsel, Library of Michigan, Claire for sure, and anyone with prior experience to cover many details. One of the first topics to discuss was to establish a district library, since that was one of the goals. This was a 2-part campaign: district library and then an operating millage. A 7-member board was appointed, 2 from the previous board of the library, 1 from the village, 3 from the township, and one from the neighboring partial township. That is, the millage portion would cover residents of the entire school district, and that's how everything was established. One day after appointment and approval of the new district library board, a lawsuit was followed by the township council. Some other things wanting to add more village members to the district board in place of some already appointed. In other words, they wanted the former 2 library board members removed, and they would have 3 members on. The lawsuit was later, soon after our election, was dismissed by a judge, granting the defendant, the library, the winner. Once the district library started meeting, the village council representative voted no on everything. However, he was just 1 vote and did not disrupt any outcomes. Once the election was done last November, that stance has been improved a lot by the negative village board member. The next bullet was, what value are you bringing to your community? Who will benefit from your service programs? And let's be realistic. Determine your future. Think in terms of value. Everybody likes a good deal. What is a good deal? Think about the benefits the most. Is it the children? Is it a certain group of people? Think big, but be realistic. People can see through a hollow promise. Realize that going for a millage in a contentious time is like competing for a sporting championship. Competition's going to be tough, and we need to bring our best efforts forward. Make sure you explain the cost to the taxpayer. It is $1 per thousand of assessed valuation of their property. For example, if the average home in your area is $100,000 assessed value, the library will receive $100 annually, or less than $850 a month, or less than $215 a week a person for a family of 4. The point is, a lot of good can be done with a little bit from everyone. Values have been brought to the community in our surrounding areas was listed as great deal with a community of library users and volunteers. Determining the needs of what the library future needs, there was a list of benefits that each group needed from birth to the elderly. Wanting to keep the amount of the millage favorable to the taxpayer at no time was an excessive millage amount chosen or discussed. We did a lot of talking about it, but it was in the discussion stages. We wanted to be transparent in putting the library in the 21st century. And so it was important that we have enough to have a millage to do all that, but we also needed to keep it so the taxpayers who had been used to free library service would be amiable to passing a millage. Choose style and appeal. What does your community need? And how to keep the library open in some communities. Another item to be aware of is the state of the economy and potential competing millages. In other words, school, parks, rec, fire, and police. It doesn't mean you should proceed, but you need to make sure you have the right message and support. And you want to use it to increase services and programs. Technology and internet access. Everything now is done online. You need the computer equipment to help patrons find jobs, apply for college, do homework, write resumes, job skills, building new skills, learning new trades, e-resources, streaming platforms like Canopy, Hulu, Netflix. To a senior citizen like me, these names for a while were really complicated. E-reading platforms like Libby and Hoopla, music platforms like Freegal and Musicat. We're going to create an image, stick to the point, just the facts, and get to the point. Be transparent. Have a great explanation for decision on why the requested amount was chosen. Design materials that will appeal to your audience. Presentation matters a whole lot. Have a speakers bureau. This is a group of community members willing to talk, shout, debate, and ultimately be the vocal representation of the Yes Committee and the millage. Expect to talk to all groups, no matter the size, from large gatherings to small clubs to the local coffee diner in your area. We had one library that had hardly anything in their community except a diner, and they were kind enough to hand out brochures and they really helped win the millage in that community. Remember, it's a good thing. Every community needs a great library. It is the heartbeat of the community. Some places, as we know, the library is the only building in the community. Believe in what you are asking for. Feel excitement. Show enthusiasm. Fight for it. Be proud. When asking for support of a new millage, some of my information throughout the presentation might feel repetitive, but I'm trying to emphasize the critical elements to make sure I get the message out to you. The next slide is identify potential roadblocks and objections. And of course, when you're dealing with a contentious millage, that will create some stuff for itself. There will be many opinions. In a contentious environment, these opinions will be stronger and louder than normal. We need to be our normal, courteous self. But don't allow your good nature to be fooled that these loud and sometimes mean voices represent the majority of the voters. They make a lot of noise, but we know that it doesn't represent the majority. Today with social media, it is so easy for a single person to post an opinion and sometimes misleading false information. Then we have some of our public who don't take the time to research other sources to confirm or validate what one person is saying. Lastly, it goes without saying, expect the unexpected. In this case, the unexpected was letters to the editor with misleading information and comments distorted that were way off base and not true. The Yes Committee also that was a part of this library and their volunteers, in knowing the contentious involved, met often, worked diligently to have only the honest facts and figures, be very transparent, raised funds to finance the campaign so they could share everything to the voters through the mailings, through technology, through media, social media, which in nowadays is so much different than when I started doing millage campaigns. We didn't do social media. And now, of course, it is the backbone of a lot of the campaigns and is a welcome sight. Choose style and appeal. What does the community need? They need to increase services and programs, technology and internet. Everything is done online, as I responded a little while ago. Stick to the point, just the facts, and get to the point. Be very transparent, have a good explanation for everything. Design materials that will appeal to your audience. Precision matters. It takes a village, and how well we know that. Create a yes team. This is a grassroots committee of 6 to 10 individuals, also known as the Citizens Advocacy Committee. In this case, the name was chosen Citizens for Lawrence Memorial Library. That is the library we're referencing in this presentation. Create a new name for your yes committee, which is what I just read to you. It is usually chosen by a committee. That name is submitted to the county clerk along with the treasurer's address. Sometimes the board will choose the name, but I think it's great if it's chosen by the yes committee because they're the ones that will be working with it the most. In your yes team, get a good cross-section of library and community members. Choose from friends of the library. Many of our libraries nowadays, out of the 396 we got in Michigan, have a friends group. They are in just what do I want to say? They're worth their time in gold. They are so helpful. Homeschool parents and caregivers. They need public libraries more than ever. And I've worked with a lot of them in these yes committees. They just can't seem to do enough or want to do enough, I mean, to help because they know the future of the library is very helpful to them. You get a group of donors, library director and some key staff member. Remember, this is considered though personal time because it's not on the library payroll. And also in this case, it was some new district library board members that were also part of the committee. Create officers and committees, select a chair. Find an honorary chair, someone very visible in the community and who is a huge library advocate. Appoint a treasurer, so very important because they have the most duties. Some examples for the treasurer are recording of donations, recording of in-kind services, thank you letters, receipts, various filings as dictated by the county clerk, etc. And of course, depending on when the millage is done, this one was done in November, but if there's a summer election, there can be a lot of committees appointed for different events. Assign responsibilities and deadlines. Share the workload. It's all part of taking a village. Some items need to be done by the library, some by the yes committee. Keeping the voters informed. Attend meetings with your local organizations and agencies such as school, chamber, Rotary, Lions Club, etc., etc. Check in regularly with committee members and be prepared to help a yes committee member when life happens. Set regularly scheduled meetings. Meetings should occur every other week for the yes committee at a minimum. Keep detailed meeting minutes. Share with all the members and the coach through the process. When I do a millage campaign, I consider myself the coach. And I also set certain guidelines. That way we all know if we're on the same page and doing the right things. All yes committee meetings must occur off-site. Never, ever at the library. No material printed at the library. No yes signs stored at the library. They need to be in somebody's garage. All the millage campaign, yes committee stuff is all done separate from the library. Create a timetable. Organize your campaign as early as possible. And of course, in this case, we had started 2 years prior, the director and I meeting, And he had some goals that included being a district library and getting a millage. So we started quite early already. And then to get the issue on the ballot, organize the campaign, it's usually 9 months out for sure. Run the campaign no later than 3-4 months in advance. This is the heart of the effort. When you get during workshops, we get deeper into specifics, look at samples of successful millage campaigns. We also work around the timeline of absentee ballots, which in this day and age has become a huge support system to millage campaigns. And now in the last year or two that we can have, that anybody can vote absentee ballot, they have been a huge influx for library campaigns. In fact, I am so happy with the absentee ballot, and the turnout has been tremendous. In Michigan, the last item on the ballots are always, and depending on, like in November when we had this one, we were the only one on the ballot. But in the bigger campaigns, the library millage is the last item on the ballot. So it's important that information go out to the voters, make sure they read through everything till they get to the end of the ballot. Some just vote for candidates and put it back in the envelope and mail it back. But this is a big support group now that has come through with the ballot language on the absentee ballots. The library is a key part of every community. As we discussed, they provide so much value to the community they serve. So you need to be ready to tell your story, tell them about past progress, growth, programs, everything that your library is doing. You need to talk to the voters, anyone who will listen. Letters to the editor, where newspapers are still available. And in this particular community, they were available and they were used weekly. Either the director, the yes committee, or as Val put it, the naysayers. We had plenty of that also. So every week there was a huge write-up in the newspaper. And radio and TV spots. A lot of them will share your story free. Some even do interviews with yes folks or the library director, which is sometimes very helpful. Attend as many local meetings as you can, and that's very important. That they get out the yes committee, the director, the board of trustees, asked to be on the agenda for brief presentation. Be sure and take handouts, ask for their support, give information about the millage campaign. And of course, this being the first millage, we couldn't report on it running out or that the approval we'd had in the past. This was all brand new to everyone that was spoken to. The first one to meet with, of course, would have been the school district, and it was because they were a part of the kind of a partnership, because the school district border is what was being used here. And so there was some other meetings, chamber, Rotary, all of these needed to know what was transpiring as far as the millage campaign. And so it was included. Social media was instituted not only by the library, but by the yes committee. Those should be totally separate handles to work with. And of course, post success stories, post support stories, post often was part of the promotion for the social media. And do whatever is necessary to promote the millage. And make sure your handouts are attractive and that can be seen as something that people will take time to read. I've seen both done, and the most attractive one is the best. Publicity, publicity, publicity. We can never have too much publicity. And some that we've listed here: social media, brochures, bookmarks. The library put bookmarks in the books when they were being checked out. Banners, paid advertisement if they want to do that, and they did do a couple. Business marquees. I started this in my campaign training about 10 years ago, and it's free. It works beautiful. And some communities don't have much funding or people that are really involved in a yes campaign. So if you've got marquees in the community, such as a hardware store, churches are great at it. The last weekend before the election, ask them if they'll put on "Remember to Vote" on their marquees, or the date to vote, or the library ballot language, or the library millage is up for a vote, and it's this particular weekend. That has helped a lot of libraries win millages that were not able to otherwise. So combat negative and contentious information with positive and informed benefit information is important to get out there. Some of you will have a contentious millage in the future. It isn't going to be easy, but you can win. We proved that. And stay the course. Believe in your missions. Include your strongest advocates and work together. Libraries are important. You are important. Our young people's futures are important. And every community needs a great library, as we have stated several times, and we can't emphasize that enough. I'm here to help anytime, day or night, if any of you are interested. And even if you know it'll be contentious, now that I've got one under my belt, I think we can do them pretty well. And I do them free, and I'm with the committee from start to finish, and with the library and the director. Once I get word that the board has asked me to do the millage, I jump in with both feet, and we work full speed ahead to do the millage campaign. Believe in what you're asking for. Feel excitement. Show enthusiasm. Be proud for what you're working for. And just know that that library is helping every person in the community. Since the library millage passed in this community, and that was last November, their library cards have doubled. We've had people come into the library and say, "I didn't vote for it, and I'm so embarrassed. I'm so proud of this community now." And so it is just, no matter if it is a contentious one, feel free to know that it can happen. And be it a first-time millage, be it a renewal millage, they're all out there, and we've done all kinds and all sizes, and we've done county ones. In fact, I've got Kent District Library coming up next year, and that's a county-wide. We have 20 branches. It's very involved, but and we've got some contentious areas right now in our county, so we are trying to ward some of it off. But anyway, do we have a few questions out there? Is there anyone that would like to ask a question?
Is there anyone out there who is facing a millage right now? Who has a question? You guys are quiet today.
Yeah, well, if you are,
There's a question. What's the best way to deal with letters to the editor?
there really is none other than to, if it is a negative one, make sure a positive one follows the following week. In this case, that, like I said, there were so many editors, letters to the editor. Some were very factual that the director had wrote, and which was very helpful. And the others were just mainly very, very negative. But yeah, there really isn't a special way, because it's all up to the newspaper on what they will print. Sometimes they, eliminate some of the lines, I'm sure. And I've heard comments that they didn't print my whole letter, so no, there is just no way to discourage or offset good or bad letters to the editor.
Do you have, is your contact information on your slides?
It
Shirley?
is. I was just going to say that. On the last slide is my email address, my phone number. I thank you very much for the time today. If you were thinking of doing a millage, be sure and contact me. We are already getting a number for next, for 24. We've got a couple for 23. Remember, if you do one in an odd year, there is a cost to the library for that, depending on if there are other millages. You can share that cost, but those that are doing it this year are having to pay for it. And so far, none of them have a partner involved, but one of them might have one coming up.
And that cost can be pretty substantial.
Depending on the size,
Yep.
You bet it is. Like if my library did one, because it's a county system, it would be over $250,000. So obviously we're not going to do it in an off year. But I know one of the libraries, it's going to cost them, that is doing it this year, it's costing them about $8,000, and that's a fairly small community. So you want to check that. And I always tell them, check out your costs first, because that is just the way it is. You have to pay up front. And if there's 2 or 3 millages, it's not too bad, because you share that cost then. But this is just the way it is in the system.
And as much as a lot of us fear and dislike this particular activity of getting a millage, give yourself plenty of time. Like Anne mentioned in her presentation and others, don't do this at the last minute.
No,
make sure you have a lot of time.
You make sure you have a lot of time. Yeah. And be sure and check. Sometimes people think if their millage is ending in 24, they need to do it in 23. But when is the tax collection in 24? Will that take you to 25? So there are a number of timetables that you want to check to make sure that, no, I don't need to do it in an odd year. I can wait till the even year, etc. And I also, at every presentation I make, I emphasize the library trustee manual that our truly Claire puts together. We've got one out 2022, and I know that she's working even on updating that.
Yeah, it actually just shipped.
Pardon?
The newest one is just been printed, and it's going to be shipping shortly.
Good, good. That answers so many questions for Board of Trustees. So, and I know you can print them offline. Make sure that your trustees and your director has one in hand, because there are so many questions that trustees have, and they feel frustrated. They don't want to call their attorney. I know they call Claire, but I just think if you've got that in hand and read it, and it's categorized so that, you know, if there's a particular subject you're looking for, you can go to that category. And when I'm out in the field doing these workshops and millage campaigns, people have complimented the library on the fact that these are available and how much use they've gotten out of them. And I carry some with me. If they don't have them and they're not aware of them, I give them one, because I just feel that that is just like having a book to follow on how to do this or how to do that or how to cook a pot roast. You know, you need direction. And so I am very adamant about that. And I always bring that up to make sure that you use that. The Michigan Library Association is getting a lot of material out now about book challenges and how we're not having any material in our libraries that are against the law. So we've got a lot going on for all of you people that are in the library world. Be sure and check it out, take advantage of it, and know that there's a lot of people that have your back, and that we can continue to, the library or the PAC pays for the millage to be on the ballot. Is there a fee even if the millage is on a regular November election ballot? Not if the November ballot is in the even year. If it is in the odd year, yes, there still is a cost. And as far as the PAC paying for the millage, that would be a whole separate entity that is separate from the millage campaign. So I'm not sure, Claire, maybe you could answer that one on the PAC.
I think that the generally the municipal entity pays for it. So generally that would be the library would pay for it. Could the PAC pay for it? I think they could. I'd have to double check. I've never been asked that question before, but I can't off the top of my head think of a reason why they wouldn't be able to, but I can double check. I know the library generally pay for it.
For what?
The cost of the election.
Oh yeah, that way. Yes. Okay, yeah, that I know.
Right. But all the other expenses are, the PAC would have to pay for its own expenses. The library wouldn't pay for that.
Right. That's what I thought. Okay, very good. Well, thank you again for everyone that tuned in, and we trust that you were able to glean some information from our presentation. And like I said, if you think later of a question or want to give me a phone call, all that information is on the last slide. And I look forward to talking to you. Thanks a bunch, everybody.
Thank you, Shirley. We have a little bit extra time. Does anybody have any other questions for Val or for Shirley? Oh, it seems like maybe we're good. Well, I want to thank our speakers, Val and Shirley. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. They both were really informative and helpful. And thank you for everybody for coming. Thanks again. If you have any millage questions, don't hesitate to reach out to the presenters. And so, yes, I'm sending everybody to you guys. And as always, you're always welcome to give me a call as well.